A nurse texted me, "Don't go anywhere." What she revealed about my daughter left me frozen. I was standing in my bathroom, adjusting my tie in the mirror, getting ready to drive to my daughter's house for what I believed was a simple birthday dinner. Everything felt normal, comfortable. Then, my phone buzzed. It wasn't my daughter. It was a message from someone at the medical clinic we'd visited together. Just one line. "Do not go to dinner tonight. Come see me immediately. Please trust me." I got in my car to find out if she was telling the truth. What she showed me shattered everything I believed about my own family. Welcome to Dad Revenge. I truly appreciate you being here and choosing to watch this story today. If you're still with me, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I read every single one. Also, please keep in mind, parts of this story are fictional, shaped for entertainment and educational value. Any similarities to real people or places are coincidental, but the lesson it carries is worth paying attention to. Everything started from a simple choice that Thursday afternoon. Burgundy or charcoal gray, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, holding two ties up to my collar, trying to remember which color Brenda said she preferred. The October light filtered through the frosted window, casting soft shadows across the small room that smelled faintly of Old Spice, and the lavender soap Daphne used to buy in bulk. I miss that smell. Daphne has been gone for 3 years now, but sometimes, on crisp autumn afternoons like this one, I still expect to hear her footsteps in the hallway. Burgundy felt too formal for a family birthday dinner. Charcoal gray it was. I was halfway through the Windsor knot muscle memory from 40 years of wearing a tie to work, when my phone buzzed on the granite countertop. The vibration sent it skittering toward the edge, and I caught it just before it tumbled into the sink. My heart did that little skip it always does when something moves too fast, a reminder. I'm 72 now, not 32. The screen showed a text message from an unknown number. Area code 206, local at least. I tapped it open, expecting spam about extended car warranties. Instead I read, "Mr. Hartley, this is Susan Mitchell, RN at Evergreen Medical Clinic. Your daughter Brenda picked up a prescription for sedatives yesterday. The pharmacy notes say, crush into food. Please do not go to tonight's dinner. Come to room 3 at the clinic immediately. This is urgent. Your life may depend on it." I read it again, then a third time. The words didn't make sense. They couldn't be real. Brenda wouldn't. No, that's ridiculous. My daughter, who used to bring me breakfast in bed on Father's Day, who cried when we had to put down our old golden retriever, Max. She wouldn't hurt me, but nurses don't send messages like this as jokes. My hands started to shake. The phone felt suddenly heavy. I set it down on the counter and gripped the edge of the sink, staring at my reflection. The same face I'd seen for 7 decades looked back at me. The navy anchor tattoo on my forearm that had faded to blue-gray over the years. I looked old, vulnerable, the kind of man someone might think they could get away with hurting. "Stop it," I told myself aloud, the sound of my own voice grounding me slightly in the quiet house. "This is paranoia talking. Brenda loves you. But then why would a nurse send this message?" I picked up the phone again and scrolled to Brenda's contact. Her profile picture, taken last Christmas, showed her smile wide and genuine. Patrick's arm around her shoulders seemed to mock me. Could someone who looked that happy be planning something so horrible? The rational part of my brain, the engineer who spent 30 years designing bridges and calculating load-bearing weights, kicked in. I had spent my entire professional life dealing with facts, stress tests, and structural integrity. I needed more information. I needed to talk to this Susan's Mitchell person and figure out what was really going on. My thumb hovered over Brenda's name. I could call her right now, ask her directly, but if this nurse was telling the truth, calling Brenda would alert her. And if she really had picked up sedatives with instructions to crush them into my food. A memory surfaced unbidden, Daphne's voice tired but firm saying, "Scott, sometimes the people closest to us are the ones we understand least." She'd said that 3 years ago, during one of our last conversations before she passed. We'd been talking about Brenda's marriage, about how Patrick seemed charming, but something felt off. Daphne had been sick then, too sick to articulate exactly what bothered her, but I'd seen the worry in her eyes. I dismissed it. Patrick was fine. Brenda was happy. Everything was fine, was it though? I thought about the last few months. Brenda's phone calls had become less frequent, her visits shorter. When she did come over, she seemed distracted, checking her phone constantly. Patrick rarely accompanied her anymore, always citing work obligations. And last month, when I'd offered to help them with some financial difficulties, I'd overheard them discussing unpaid credit card bills and some vaguely mentioned investment gone wrong. Brenda had gotten defensive, almost angry. "We're handling it, Dad," she'd snapped. "We don't need your money." I'd chalked it up to pride. Nobody likes admitting they are struggling financially, especially not to their parents. Patrick, an insurance adjuster, had always projected an image of immense success. He wore designer suits, drove a leased BMW, and talked a big game. Now, I wondered if there was something darker underneath that polished exterior. The phone was still in my hand. The message still glowed on the screen, those terrible words refusing to disappear. "Your life may depend on it." I sat down on the edge of the bathtub, suddenly exhausted. The charcoal gray tie hung loose around my neck, unfinished. Through the bathroom door, I could see my bedroom, the bed I'd shared with Daphne for 45 years. The comfortable predictability of a life well lived. A life someone might want to end early. I shook my head, trying to clear it. This was crazy. There had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe this Susan Mitchell had mixed up patient files. Maybe someone was pranking me, but the message had used my name, and Brenda's name, and mentioned Evergreen Medical Clinic, where Brenda had taken me for a checkup just 2 months ago. Too many details to be random. I stood up, my knees protesting slightly, and looked at myself in the mirror one more time. The man staring back at me had survived boot camp at 18, a deployment in the Gulf, the death of his wife, and 7 decades of life's regular curveballs. He was not going to die from a crushed sedative in his birthday dinner mashed potatoes, without asking some hard questions first. I unlocked my phone and pressed the call button on the unknown number. The phone rang once, twice, then a woman's voice, breathless and urgent, answered. "Mr. Hartley, thank God you called. We don't have much time. I'd driven the 15 minutes from my house to Evergreen Medical in a daze, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, my mind spinning through every possible explanation for that text message. By the time I pulled into the parking lot, I'd convinced myself 3 times that this was all a misunderstanding, and 3 times talked myself back into walking through those glass doors. Now I stood outside room 3, staring at the brass number plate like it might offer me some kind of guidance. I knocked twice. The door opened immediately. "Mr. Hartley." The woman who stood before me was younger than I'd expected, maybe mid-40s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and eyes that looked like they'd seen too many late shifts. Her scrubs were navy blue, and she held a manila folder against her chest like a shield. "I'm Susan Mitchell. Thank you for coming. Sit down. I know this is overwhelming, but I need you to see something." I sat. The vinyl chair creaked under my weight. Susan pulled up a rolling stool and positioned herself directly across from me. "2 days ago," she began, "your daughter Brenda came to this clinic for a prescription refill. I wasn't her assigned nurse, but I happened to be at the pharmacy counter when she picked up the medication. She pulled out a photocopied prescription form and laid it on the exam table between us. This is what she filled." I leaned forward, squinting at the small print. Lorazepam, 20 milligrams, 30 tablets, Brenda's signature at the bottom, her looping handwriting, unmistakable. "Lorazepam is a sedative," Susan continued, her voice professionally calm. "It's commonly prescribed for anxiety. There's nothing unusual about the prescription itself. What caught my attention was this." She pointed to a handwritten note in the pharmacy instructions section. "Crush into food for easier administration." The words hit me like a physical blow. Crush into food. I repeated numbly. "Why would that? That notation isn't from the doctor or the pharmacist." Susan interrupted. "It's from the patient. Your daughter specifically requested those instructions. She told our pharmacy tech that you had trouble swallowing pills." She paused. "Do you have trouble swallowing pills, Mr. Hartley?" "No." My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. "I take my blood pressure medication every morning. I've never had trouble swallowing pills." Susan nodded slowly. "I thought that might be the case. Mr. Hartley, I need to tell you something, and it's not going to be easy to hear. She took a breath, seeming to steady herself. 3 years ago, I lost my mother. She was 78. For months, she'd been complaining of confusion, dizziness, memory problems. We thought it was dementia. Her voice cracked slightly. It wasn't dementia. My sister-in-law had been giving her sedatives, crushed into her morning oatmeal. By the time we figured it out, my mother had signed over her house, her savings, everything. She died 6 months later in a state facility. The room felt suddenly airless. Why are you telling me this? Because I've seen this pattern before. Susan pulled another document from the folder. Your daughter's husband, Patrick Walsh, is a patient here. He sees Dr. Kenneth Graves. Dr. Graves is what we call a generous prescriber. He's also Patrick's golf buddy at Broadmoor Golf Club. Last month, I overheard them discussing some financial difficulties Patrick was having. Something about needing money quickly to cover gambling debts. My chest tightened. How much money? I don't know the specifics, but Patrick mentioned a timeline. 2 weeks to pay someone back, or there would be consequences. She met my eyes. Mr. Hartley, your daughter picked up that sedative prescription 2 days ago. Your birthday dinner is tonight. The timing is not a coincidence. I sat in stunned silence. The engineer in me, connecting the dots even as my heart tried to reject the entire equation. There's more, Susan said quietly. She reached into the folder one last time and pulled out what looked like medication records. Last month, when you came in for your regular checkup, Brenda accompanied you. According to our pharmacy records, Brenda picked up a bottle of multivitamins. She told the tech they were a gift for you, extra strength to help with energy levels. She looked up. Did you receive those vitamins? Yes. A cold sensation began spreading through my chest. She brought them over the next day. Told me they'd help me feel more alert. I've been taking one every morning with breakfast. Susan pushed the paper across the table toward me. No, Mr. Hartley, those vitamins weren't vitamins. You've been taking low-dose sedatives every morning for the past 2 months. 2 months? The words echoed in my head as I stared at the paper in front of me. Week by week, the memories came flooding back, now tinted by the truth I'd been too trusting to see. I had been drugged, slowly, systematically, deliberately. My own daughter had been poisoning me for 8 weeks. My blood ran cold. The sheer level of betrayal was unfathomable. Mr. Hartley? Susan's voice sounded distant. Are you all right? I wasn't all right. I was trying to reconcile the daughter I thought I knew with the person who'd been systematically poisoning me for 8 weeks. My hands gripped the edge of the exam table, the vinyl cool under my palms, anchoring me to the present, while my mind spiraled backward through the past 2 months. Week -8, mid-August. I'd been in the garage organizing my toolbox. Brenda had stopped by unannounced. Dad, you look pale, she'd said, her brow furrowed in that worried way she'd inherited from her mother. When was your last checkup? April. Maybe. I'm fine, honey, that's 5 months ago. You're 72, Dad. You need to be more careful about your health. She'd pulled out her phone. Dr. Graves has an opening next week. I'll make you an appointment. At the time, I'd thought it was touching. My daughter caring about my health. Now, replaying the conversation in my head, I heard something different in her tone. Urgency, determination, planning. Week -6, early September, Dr. Kenneth Graves's office. He'd shaken my hand with the kind of firm grip that felt rehearsed. The appointment had been quick, blood pressure normal, heart rate fine. Then, at the end, he'd written something on his prescription pad. I'm going to give you some supplements, he'd said. Multivitamins, good for cardiovascular health at your age. Brenda can pick them up from our pharmacy downstairs. I'd thanked him, thinking nothing of it. I hadn't known he was Patrick's golf buddy, hadn't known the supplements he'd given me were actually low-dose sedatives, designed to make me appear confused and forgetful. Week -4, late September. That's when the real problem started. I'd misplaced my car keys 3 times in 1 week, found them in strange places, the refrigerator, the garage freezer. Each time I'd stood there, trying to remember putting them there and coming up empty. The days started blurring together. I'd check the calendar in the morning, certain it was Wednesday, only to discover it was Friday. Simple tasks took longer. I'd walk into a room and forget why I'd gone there. My daughter had noticed, of course. "Dad, you seem off lately," Brenda had said one afternoon, her voice laced with a concern that now felt entirely performative. "Are you sleeping okay? Eating enough?" "I'm fine," I'd insisted. "Just getting older, I guess. Maybe you should see Dr. Graves again," she'd suggested. I had declined. Whatever I was experiencing, I figured it would pass. It didn't pass. It got worse. Week -2, early October, I'd been trying to schedule an appointment with my accountant. Brenda had been visiting that afternoon, sitting at the kitchen table while I made the call from the living room. "Hi, this is Scott Hartley," I'd said to the voicemail. "I need to set up a meeting about the words had slipped away. About the year thing. The tax year. Can you call me back?" Through the doorway, I'd seen Brenda watching me, her phone in her hand, positioned like she'd been recording. At the time, I'd thought nothing of it. Now, sitting in Susan's exam room, I realized exactly what she'd been doing. She'd been collecting evidence, recording her father's sedative-induced confusion to build a case for incompetence. "To prove I couldn't manage my own affairs, the symptoms you experienced," Susan said gently, pulling me back to the present. "They're all consistent with regular sedative use, memory problems, confusion, difficulty with routine tasks." "Evidence," I said, the word tasting bitter. She was building evidence. Susan nodded solemnly. "For what's called a conservatorship hearing. If she could prove you were mentally incompetent, she could gain legal control over your finances, your property, your medical decisions. Everything." My hands clenched into fists. 40 years of raising that girl, teaching her to ride a bike, walking her down the aisle at her wedding. 40 years of unconditional love, trust, and sacrifice. And she'd repaid me by turning me into an obstacle between her husband and whatever money they thought I had. The anger that rose in my chest was unlike anything I'd felt before. Not the hot, explosive kind, but something cold and calculated. "Mr. Hartley," Susan's voice cut through my thoughts, steady but urgent. "What they gave you before was bad. What they're planning for tonight is worse, much worse." Her next words felt like a punch to the gut. "The sedatives in tonight's dessert chocolate cake, according to the casual conversation Patrick had with our pharmacy tech yesterday, will be triple the dose you've been taking daily." She pulled out a calculator. "Based on your weight, 75 kilograms, and your age, that amount will cause respiratory depression within 45 minutes of ingestion. Possibly cardiac arrest." Respiratory depression. Cardiac arrest. She was describing my death with the same matter-of-fact tone I'd used when calculating structural loads on bridge designs. "They'll let you eat dessert, maybe watch you get drowsy," Susan continued. "They'll attribute it to your condition, the dementia they've been staging for 2 months. By the time they call 911, it'll be too late. The medical examiner will see an elderly man who accidentally overdosed on prescription medication. The case will be closed within a week." My knuckles went white gripping the exam table. "How do you even know about tonight's dosage?" "Because I process the pharmacy orders. Patrick asked our tech, Marcy, if the amount we discussed with Dr. Graves would be sufficient for tonight's purpose. I also did some digging. Your son-in-law has 3 civil judgments against him, totaling $47. Fisozone. But that's just what's official. The real problem is Marco Rossi." "Who is Marco Rossi?" "He runs a private lending operation out of Tukwila. Patrick borrowed $400,000 from him 6 months ago. The word around certain circles is that Rosie gave Patrick a deadline. 2 weeks from today, if Patrick doesn't pay, there will be consequences. $400,000. How do you gamble away that kind of money?" I muttered. "Online poker, mostly. He's what they call a whale, a high-stakes loser who keeps coming back." Susan's expression was grim. "Your house is worth $870. Mr. Hartley, no mortgage. You also have a life insurance policy through Navy Federal Credit Union. $250,000. Brenda is listed as the sole beneficiary. $800 plus $250. Over $1 million. More than enough to pay off a loan shark and have plenty left over. More than enough to make murder worthwhile. The timeline fits," I said, my voice sounding distant. "Patrick needs the money in 2 weeks. If I die tonight, Brenda inherits everything. The life insurance pays out within 30 days. They sell the house. They pay off the debt, exactly. Susan leaned forward. This isn't just financial desperation. This is a calculated plan involving your daughter, your son-in-law, and Dr. Graves. They've been working on this for months. It's all designed to make tonight's death look natural. Even expected, a strange calm settled over me. I'd spent 8 weeks being slowly drugged into appearing incompetent. 8 weeks watching my daughter build a case against my mental fitness while poisoning me. But I'd also spent 4 years in the Navy learning how to respond to threats. 30 years as an engineer learning how to analyze systems and find their weak points. You can't go to that dinner, Susan said urgently. If you walk into that house tonight, you might not walk back out. I stood up, feeling decades of military training crystallizing into a cold, clear purpose. Oh, I'm going, I said quietly, but I'm not going as a victim. I looked at the wall clock. It was 3 p.m. Dinner was at 7 p.m. I had 4 hours to tear down the world they had built and ensure they would never profit off my demise. Susan, I said, looking her dead in the eye, I need proof, concrete, undeniable proof, and I need to secure my assets immediately. She looked at me, a mixture of fear and respect in her eyes. What are you going to do? I'm going to let them spring their trap, I replied, a cold smirk forming on my lips. But first, I need to make a few stops. My stop was Naval Credit Union. I walked into the familiar branch, heading straight for the branch manager's office. Bill Evans, a man I'd known for 15 years, looked up from his desk. Scott, what brings you in today? Bill, I need to make some immediate, irrevocable changes to my accounts and my life insurance policy. I sat down, my posture rigid. I want to remove Brenda Walsh as the beneficiary on my life insurance, my pension, and my savings accounts. Bill's friendly demeanor shifted to professional concern. That's a major change, Scott, are you sure? Perfectly clear. I want the sole beneficiary of all my liquid assets and my life insurance to be a newly formed trust in the name of my granddaughter, Olivia Walsh. I want the trust structured so that neither Brenda nor Patrick can access a single cent of it under any circumstances until Olivia turns 25. I want an independent executor. Bill nodded slowly, typing into his terminal. I can execute the beneficiary changes immediately. You'll need to sign here and here. I signed the documents with a steady hand. My signature, which Brenda had tried to argue was becoming shaky and confused, was as sharp and bold as it had been 40 years ago. With a few strokes of a pen, Patrick's $250 lifeline vanished into thin air. Next stop. My attorney's office. David Klein had drafted my last will and testament alongside Daphne decades ago. When I burst into his office, he took one look at my face and cleared his schedule. Scott, you look like you're going to war, David said. I am. I need to rewrite my will today, right now. I want to entirely disinherit Brenda Walsh. David frowned. Disinherit your only child? Washington state law can be tricky with complete disinheritance. She could contest it, claim undue influence or lack of testamentary capacity. She will absolutely try to claim lack of capacity, I said, pulling out a copy of the medical record Susan had given me. Because she's been trying to artificially manufacture a case for it by poisoning me with sedatives. David's eyes went wide as he read the paperwork. My God, Scott, we need to go to the police. Not yet. I need to catch her in the act. But first, I need to make sure my assets are locked down tighter than Fort Knox. Draft the new will, the house, the vintage Mustang, the stock portfolio, everything goes to Olivia's trust. Include a strict no-contest clause. If Brenda tries to challenge the will, she forfeits any right to even contest it. Add a specific addendum stating that I am of sound mind, fully aware of my actions, and deliberately excluding Brenda due to extreme betrayal. David typed furiously, I'll have 2 junior partners come in to witness the signing, and I'll video record the entire session to prove you are lucid and competent. She won't be able to touch a dime. By 4:30 p.m., my financial and legal affairs were bulletproof. If I died tonight, Brenda would get absolutely nothing. Patrick would have Marco Rosi's goons knocking on his door, and they wouldn't find a single penny of my money to satisfy his debts. My final stop was a specialized electronics store on 4th Avenue. I bought a discreet GPS tracking device and drove past Patrick's leased BMW, quickly attaching the magnetic tracker under the rear bumper. I needed to know exactly where he was spending his time and my money. Then, I drove back to the clinic parking lot to meet Susan. Under the harsh fluorescent lights of the parking lot, Susan handed me the final piece of the puzzle. "It's a recording device, video and audio," she said. She handed me something no bigger than a shirt button. "This one clips under your shirt, right here. The lens is pinhole-sized. Nobody will notice it unless they're specifically looking. It connects to this app via Bluetooth. I can monitor the feed from my phone. If something goes wrong, I'll call 911 immediately. And if things go according to their plan?" I asked. "If I don't hear from you by 8:30 p.m., I'm calling Detective Michael Torres. He's with Seattle PD, works the Fraud and Elder Abuse Division. He's one of the good ones." 8:30 p.m. That gave me an hour and a half at dinner before the cavalry arrived. "Act normal when you arrive," Susan instructed. "Play the role. Give them what they want until dessert. When they bring out the cake, you need to avoid eating it. Spill your coffee on it. Claim you're too full. Whatever works. The important thing is that you do not ingest whatever they've put in that cake." "What if they insist?" I asked. "Then you have it on video. Attempted murder caught on camera. But Mr. Hartley, once you walk into that house, you're in enemy territory. You need to stay calm, stay in character, and get out as soon as you can." Enemy territory. I'd been trained for this in the Navy, the ability to compartmentalize fear and focus on the objective. I clipped the device to my shirt, adjusting the angle. I tested it with Susan, ensuring the video and audio were crystal clear. "Good luck," Susan said, "and remember, 8:30. I climbed into my truck, a 15-year-old Ford F-150. 75 minutes. Until dinner, I adjusted the rearview mirror, caught my own reflection. The confusion was gone. The fear was gone. In their place was something harder, something colder. A Navy veteran coming out of retirement for one last mission. I took the long way to Brenda's house, driving past Green Lake. Traffic was light. Most people were already home, sitting down to dinner with their families. Normal families. Families where daughters didn't poison their fathers. My phone buzzed in the cup holder, a text from Susan, "Camera feed clear. I'm watching. Be safe." I didn't respond. The GPS announced my arrival. I pulled into the driveway slowly. The house glowed with warm light, pumpkins on the porch, smoke curling from the chimney, perfect inviting a flawless trap. I checked the button camera once more, still recording. I turned off the engine and stepped into the cool evening air. Brenda opened the door before I could knock. "Dad." Her voice was bright, almost musical, but when she wrapped her arms around me, the embrace felt hollow. All motion, no warmth. "Happy birthday." Come in. "Thanks, honey." I stepped into the foyer, noting how her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. They were calculating, assessing. She was dressed for something important, for murder. Apparently, "Patrick," she called, "Dad's here." Heavy footsteps thundered through the hallway. Patrick emerged, his face flushed. He reeked of bourbon. "Scott." "The birthday boy." He grabbed my hand. 73, right?" 72. I let it slide, played my role. "I'm getting old," I said, allowing a slight tremor into my voice. "Can't remember if I fed the cat this morning." I didn't have a cat, but Brenda's eyes lit up at my confusion. "That's okay, Dad," she said, her voice dripping with patronizing concern. "We all forget things sometimes. Come on, let me show you what we've done with the living room." The living room looked like a furniture show room. A leather sectional, abstract art on the walls. Patrick was an insurance adjuster. Brenda worked part-time as a real estate agent. This level of spending didn't match their income. They were living on credit, or planning to live on inheritance. "Grandpa!" Olivia bounded down the stairs, and I felt something genuine. She crashed into me, her arms squeezing tight around my waist. "Happy birthday, I made you a card." She pulled back, grinning. "It's a bridge because you're an engineer. Get it?" "I love it already," I said, my chest ached looking at her. Daphne's eyes, my stubborn chin, completely unaware that her parents were planning to kill her grandfather over dessert. "Come on, dinner's almost ready," Olivia said. "Mom made your favorite pot roast." Over Olivia's head, I caught Patrick and Brenda exchanging a look. Brief, barely a second, but I saw it, the kind of glance conspirators share when everything is going according to plan. Patrick's slight nod, Brenda's answering smile. The button camera under my shirt was recording. Susan was watching. I hoped she was paying attention to that look. Smells wonderful, I said, letting Olivia lead me through the house. The dining room table was set elaborately, white tablecloth, good china, candles already lit, and in the center a covered cake stand, chocolate cake. No doubt my favorite, my execution. Why don't you sit here, Dad? Brenda said, pulling out the chair at the head of the table. Birthday boy gets the best seat. I sat, Patrick moved to my left, Brenda to my right, positioning themselves like guards. Olivia took the chair across from me, still chattering about school innocent noise that felt like a shield against what her parents were planning. Let me get the roast, Brenda said, disappearing into the kitchen. Patrick refilled his bourbon. I watched his hand shake slightly as he lifted it to his lips. He was nervous. Good, you okay, Grandpa? Olivia asked. You look kind of, serious. I arranged my face into what I hoped was a confused expression, just trying to remember if I locked the front door when I left. Brenda returned with the roast on a serving platter. Patrick stood to help her serve, steering me like I was incompetent. I caught our reflection in the hallway mirror. We were all smiling, the perfect family portrait. The wall clock behind Olivia read 7:00 exactly. Susan would be watching the camera feed. Detective Torres was on standby for 8:30. I had 90 minutes to get through this dinner without eating poisoned dessert. This looks wonderful, honey, I said as Brenda served the pot roast. The smell was actually good. She'd always been a decent cook, had learned from Daphne. The thought of her using her mother's recipes while planning to kill her father felt like another layer of betrayal. I hope you like it, Brenda said, her eyes watchful. I know you've been having trouble with your appetite lately. She was building a narrative. He wasn't eating well. We were worried. Appetite's fine. I said, just getting older, can't eat as much as I used to. Patrick laughed too loudly. Join the club, Scott. I'm 42 and I already feel ancient. 42 and drowning in gambling debt. So, how's work been, Patrick? I asked, making sure to eat slowly. Great, actually, he leaned forward, his enthusiasm manufactured. We're looking at some investment opportunities. Real estate ventures in Spokane, that sounds expensive, I said mildly. Well, you gotta spend money to make money. Patrick drained his glass. We're leveraging some assets, working with some private lenders. It's all very strategic. Private lenders, Marco Rossi, $400 at interest rates that would make legitimate banks look charitable. Dad, you should really take your vitamins, Brenda said suddenly, pulling a pill bottle from her pocket. You forgot this morning, didn't you? The vitamins, the ones that had been drugging me for 2 months. I did? I let confusion creep into my voice. I thought I took them, you didn't, she insisted, shaking 2 pills into her palm and sliding them across the table. Take them now with dinner. Doctor's orders. Dr. Graves's orders, more likely. The corrupt physician who played golf with Patrick. I picked up the pills, made a show of examining them. These look different from my usual ones. They're the same brand, Dad. Brenda's voice was patient, but I caught the edge underneath. She needed me docile, confused, ready for the final dose in dessert. I palmed the pills smoothly, a trick I'd learned in the Navy. Pretended to pop them in my mouth, lifted my water glass, made a swallowing motion. The pills stayed safely in my closed fist. Down the hatch, I said, opening my mouth slightly to show it was empty. Brenda relaxed. Just want to make sure you're taking care of yourself. Under the table, I slipped the pills into my jacket pocket. 2 more pieces of evidence. The main course dragged on. Patrick talked about investments he didn't have money for. Brenda asked concerned questions about my health. And I sat at the head of the table, watching the clock tick. Past 7:30, then 7:40. Finally, the plates were empty. Brenda stood, smoothing her dress with hands that trembled slightly. I'll get dessert, she said. Your favorite, Dad, chocolate cake, just like Mom used to make. While Brenda was in the kitchen, Olivia leaned toward me with the kind of honesty only teenagers possess. Grandpa, you seem totally fine to me. Her voice was quiet. Mom keeps saying you're starting to forget stuff and get confused. But you remembered my birthday last month. Out of the mouths of babes. Or observant 14-year-olds who hadn't yet learned that sometimes adults lie for terrible reasons. Well, I have my good days and bad days, I said carefully, aware Patrick had gone very still beside me. But tonight, you seem totally normal. Olivia frowned. Actually, everyone's been acting weird tonight. Not you, them. She gestured vaguely toward the kitchen. Why does Mom keep watching you like that? Like she's waiting for something to happen. And Dad, you've been super jumpy all night. Is something wrong? Is it about money? I heard you guys arguing last week about bills. Patrick's wine glass hit the table hard, the crystal ringing out sharply. Everything's fine, Olivia. Your mom's just concerned about Grandpa's health. Nothing for you to worry about. But Olivia wasn't backing down. But why are you guys being so weird about it? This creepy watching thing, Olivia. Patrick's voice had an edge now. Drop it. I'm just saying it's weird. No, that's enough. Brenda's voice cut through the dining room like a knife. She stood in the doorway from the kitchen, hands empty, her face carefully composed, but her eyes blazing. She'd heard Olivia poking holes in the carefully constructed narrative they'd been building for 8 weeks. Mom, I was just, go to your room. Brenda's tone was flat, final. Olivia's eyes widened. What? Why? I didn't do anything. Now Olivia, the harshness in Brenda's voice made even me flinch. The mask had slipped. But Mom, did I stutter? Brenda took a step into the room. Go to your room, do your homework. I'll bring you cake later. Olivia stood slowly, her eyes shiny with tears, not understanding what she'd done wrong. It's okay, sweetheart, I said gently. I'll see you before I leave tonight, if I live that long. Olivia walked past Brenda without looking at her. The sound of her bedroom door closing echoed through the house. Absolute. The dining room felt very different. The pretense of a normal family birthday dinner had evaporated. Now it was just the three of us, no innocent witness. She's too smart for her own good, Brenda said quietly. She gets that from her grandmother, I replied. Patrick laughed, a short, bitter sound. Well, Daphne's not here to interfere, is she? The casual invocation of my dead wife's name in the context of their murder plot made something cold settle in my chest. But I kept my face neutral. Brenda emerged from the kitchen, carrying a chocolate cake that represented something far darker than love. 3 layers of rich chocolate with dark ganache frosting, exactly the way Daphne used to make it. Here we go, Brenda said, her voice artificially bright. Her hands trembled as she set the cake stand on the table. She cut the first slice, a massive wedge, easily 3 times larger than the pieces she'd cut for Patrick and herself. More cake meant more surface area to hide crushed sedatives. That's a lot of cake, I observed mildly. Well, it's your birthday, you should have as much as you want. Brenda's voice was steady, but I caught the white residue on her fingertips as she slid the plate toward me, a fine powder that clung to her fingerprints like chalk dust. She quickly wiped her hands on her napkin, but I'd already seen it. The camera under my shirt had captured it. She positioned the plate directly in front of me, then settled back into her chair, watching. Waiting, Patrick checked his watch, a quick flick of his wrist. Aren't you two having cake? I asked, noting their much smaller slices remained untouched. We'll wait for you to start, Brenda said. Birthday boy gets the first bite. They needed to watch me eat the poison slice. Needed to be sure I'd consumed it before they could relax and mentally spend the $1.120 Zowd I represented. I picked up my fork, eat this cake and I'd die, don't eat it, and I'd have to explain why. The clock read 7:42, 48 minutes until Susan called Detective Torres. I just had to survive that long. Dad, Brenda's voice had an edge now. Are you okay? Just admiring it. I said you did such a beautiful job. Well, go ahead, Patrick said, his mask slipping. Try it. I cut into the cake with my fork, lifted it toward my mouth, let it hover there for just a moment. I'm sorry, I said slowly, pushing back from the table. I need to wash my hands before I eat. Old Navy habit. I set the fork down carefully. Brenda's face went rigid. Dad, just eat first. The cake will get warm. The desperation in her voice was naked. Just a minute, I said, my voice mild. Won't take long. I stood moving with careful slowness. Patrick didn't even look up. Was already refilling his bourbon, rambling about some real estate investment. The hallway stretched out before me. The bathroom was to the left, clearly visible from the dining room. Instead, I turned right. The sideboard sat against the wall. On top of it was Patrick's plate. His cake plate, a normal-sized slice. No white powder residue, safe cake. My hands moved before my brain fully caught up. Decades of Navy training taking over, Fast, silent, precise. Swap Scott's plate with Patrick's plate. Leave the poisoned slice on the sideboard. Take the safe slice, back to the table. 3 seconds. That's all it took. I heard Patrick's voice from the dining room. He had no idea he was about to eat. The sedatives meant to kill his father-in-law. I walked back into the dining room, carrying the safe cake slice, like it was exactly what I'd started with. Brenda was watching me like a hawk. Feel better? She asked, her voice tight. Much. I sat down, picked up my fork and cut into the cake. Took a bite, let the chocolate melt on my tongue. It's perfect, honey, I said and meant it. The cake was perfect. It was just the people around it who were poison. Brenda's shoulders relaxed slightly. Relief flooded her face. He's eating it. The plan is working. Except I wasn't eating poisoned cake. Patrick's safe slice sat on my plate, while the lethal dose waited on the sideboard in the hallway. Patrick was still talking, his words slurring together. He cut into his own cake, brought it to his mouth, took a big bite, the first bite of what should have been his safe slice. What was now the poisoned portion. I watched him swallow, take another bite. The clock read 7:43 minutes until Susan called Detective Torres. I took another bite of my safe cake and counted the seconds in my head. For 5 minutes, we sat there eating cake like a normal family. Then, Patrick's fork clattered onto his plate. 06. Patrick had taken his third large bite of the poisoned cake. 8:07. Brenda looked at me with growing confusion, wondering why I wasn't showing any signs of the sedatives. 8:10. Patrick's face began to change color. You okay, honey? Brenda asked, her attention shifting. Patrick had gone very still, one hand pressed against his stomach. I'm fine, he said, sounding strained. Just ate too fast, I think. 8:12. Patrick pushed back from the table abruptly, his chair scraping loud. I don't feel good. He stood, swaying slightly. His face had gone from flush to a greenish pale. Patrick? Brenda was on her feet now, alarm replacing confusion. What's wrong? I think I'm going to. He stumbled toward the hallway, hand over his mouth. 8:15. The sound of violent retching echoed from the bathroom. Brutal, wrenching, the kind of vomiting that comes from deep in the gut and doesn't stop. I'd heard that sound before. In the Navy, IPIC did that. Forced your body to expel everything in your stomach with an urgency that couldn't be ignored. Brenda stood frozen in the dining room doorway, her face a mask of panic. I don't understand what's happening. Did he eat something bad? More retching. Patrick's agony was audible. I set down my fork with deliberate calm and looked at Brenda. It wasn't sedatives, Brenda, I said quietly. She turned to me, her eyes wild. What? The cake, the slice you cut for me. I kept my voice even. Factual, it wasn't sedatives. It was Ipecac syrup. Her face went blank. Ipecac, I repeated. It's an emetic. Makes you vomit violently for 20 to 30 minutes. The pharmacist who filled your prescription, Nathan Cooper. He switched the pills, gave you Ipecac instead of lorazepam. Another wave of retching from the bathroom. That's impossible, Brenda whispered. I picked up the prescription myself. The label said lorazepam, but the pills inside weren't lorazepam. Nathan has a conscience, apparently. When Patrick told him what you were planning, yes, I know about the illegal under-the-table purchase. Nathan couldn't quite bring himself to call the police. But he also couldn't let you kill me, so he gave you something that would make me violently ill, but wouldn't actually harm me. Brenda's legs seemed to give out. She sank back into her chair. Of course I didn't eat the Ipecac-laced cake anyway, I continued. When I went to wash my hands, I swapped plates, the poisoned slice you cut for me. Patrick just ate it, and he's discovering right now what 30 milligrams of crushed Ipecac does to a human digestive system. Brenda's face cycled through shock, disbelief, denial, and finally, dawning horror. You knew this whole time, you knew. Susan Mitchell called me this afternoon, I said. The nurse at Evergreen Medical. She recognized what you were doing. Recognized it, because she'd watched her own mother die from the same scheme 3 years ago. I reached under my shirt and pulled out the button camera, held it up so Brenda could see it clearly. Everything's been recorded. Every word you said. Every concerned look you faked. Every time you monitored whether I'd taken those vitamins you've been giving me for 2 months. Brenda's eyes fixed on the camera, and something in her expression broke. From outside, the distant wail of sirens grew louder. "What did you do?" she whispered. "I called the police. Well, technically Susan called Detective Torres at 8:15. Once I was sure Patrick had ingested enough of the ipecac to need medical attention. The police are probably 3 minutes out, maybe less. The sirens were very close now." Brenda looked toward the front windows, her face chalk white, then back at me. "Dad, please, don't." My voice came out harder than I'd intended. "Don't call me that. You spent 2 months poisoning me. You baked me a birthday cake meant to kill me. You were planning to sit here and watch me die, then call 911 just late enough that I'd be dead before help arrived." I stood, the camera still in my hand. "You chose money over your father. You chose a loan shark's deadline over the man who raised you, who taught you to ride a bike, who walked you down the aisle on your wedding day. And by the way, I spent the afternoon at the bank and with my lawyer. You are completely disinherited. Everything is in a locked trust for Olivia. You get absolutely nothing." The sirens cut off abruptly. Patrick stumbled out of the bathroom, his face gray, his shirt soaked with sweat. Just as the front door, I deliberately left it unlocked, burst open. Seattle Police, Detective Michael Torres strode in, badge held high, followed by 3 uniformed officers and 2 paramedics. The chaos of flashing lights and barked commands felt surreal. Paramedics had Patrick on the dining room floor, checking his vitals while he retched into a plastic basin. One of them looked up at Detective Torres with confusion. "His blood pressure is elevated but stable. These aren't typical sedative overdose symptoms. This looks like severe gastric distress, Epixe syrup," from my chair, crushed into the cake frosting. "About 30 milligrams. I'd estimate, ma'am." "Step back, please," Torres said, his attention shifting to Brenda. He turned to me. "Mr. Hartley, I need you to explain what's happening here." I set down my fork with deliberate care. "There's a dangerous substance in that cake, Detective. My daughter put it there with the intent to harm me. She's been systematically drugging me for the past 2 months, staging evidence of cognitive decline, building a case for conservatorship so she could gain control of my assets to pay off her husband's $400 Susan loan shark debt. That's insane." Brenda's voice was shrill, desperate. "Dad, what are you saying? You're confused. You don't know what you're talking about." She turned to Torres, tears streaming down her face. "Detective, please. My father has dementia. He's been having episodes, paranoid delusions. This is exactly what I've been trying to tell his doctors." "Brenda," my voice cut through her performance. "Stop." I unbuttoned my shirt. It stopped Brenda mid-sentence. I unclipped the button camera Susan had given me. "Everything was recorded," I said, handing the tiny device to Torres. "Every word, every action, every piece of evidence she manufactured tonight. You'll want to watch the footage, particularly the part where Brenda serves the cake, where you can see white powder residue on her fingers, where she cuts an abnormally large slice for me and insists I eat first so she can watch." Brenda's face drained of what little color remained. One of the uniformed officers produced a laptop from the patrol car. Torres connected the camera. The dining room fell silent, except for Patrick's continued retching. Torres viewed the footage. I saw his expression harden when Brenda served the cake. He watched for another 30 seconds, then closed the laptop with a decisive click. "Officer Miller," he said to the young cop, "secure this as evidence." Torres stood, straightening his jacket, his eyes locked onto Brenda's. "Ma'am, I need you to place your hands behind your back." "What? No, this is ridiculous." "He's lying. He's confused." Brenda backed against the wall, her hands raised defensively. "Ma'am, hands behind your back now. I want a lawyer." I want 2 uniformed officers moved in, professional and efficient. Brenda tried to pull away, but they guided her hands behind her back. The metallic click of handcuffs echoed through the dining room. "Brenda Walsh," Torres's voice was cold, professional. "You're under arrest for elder endangerment, conspiracy to commit murder, and elder abuse. You have the right to remain silent." Brenda's scream, high-pitched, desperate, echoed through the house as the officers began leading her toward the door. 3 months later, the courthouse steps felt steeper than I remembered. January in Seattle meant gray skies and cold rain. I wore my navy dress uniform. I hadn't put it on in 15 years, but it still fit. It felt right, like I was standing not only for myself, but for everyone betrayed by the people they trusted most. Inside, the courtroom was full. Reporters crowded the back rows. FBI agents who had built a massive RICO case against Marco Rossi thanks to Patrick's desperation sat behind the prosecution. Detective Torres gave me a subtle nod as I entered. And there in the front row sat Olivia, 14 years old, sitting perfectly still, trying very hard to be brave. I had fought for and won full custody of her. I couldn't let my granddaughter grow up in the shadow of her parents' greed. Judge Ruth Wallace entered, and we all rose. She was in her 60s, gray hair pulled into a severe bun, eyes sharp and unwavering. The kind of judge who had seen humanity at its worst and still believed in accountability. We are here for sentencing in the matter of the state of Washington versus Brenda Walsh and Patrick Walsh, and the separate matter of the United States versus Nathan Cooper. Victim impact statements were presented. I had submitted mine in writing. The prosecutor read portions instead about betrayal, about trust, about 8 weeks of deliberate poisoning, and about a daughter who calculated her father's death down to insurance timelines. When Judge Wallace addressed Brenda, her voice was ice. Brenda Walsh, you are sentenced to 15 years in the Washington State Correctional Facility for women. You exploited your father's trust, systematically drugged him, and attempted to end his life for financial gain. You showed no remorse, blamed your victim, and attempted to gaslight this court as you gaslit your father. That ends today. Brenda stared straight ahead. She did not look at me once. Patrick Walsh. The judge continued. You are sentenced to 20 years in state prison. Your crimes extended beyond elder abuse. You endangered Mr. Hartley to satisfy gambling debts to organized crime. You calculated murder with precision. Patrick looked hollow, as if the weight of everything had finally crushed him. Both of them were led away in chains. I felt no triumph, only exhaustion and grief. Then Nathan Cooper's case was called. Nathan had saved my life. He'd done it in a way that wouldn't immediately expose him, risking his license and his freedom to protect a stranger. Because of my testimony and his cooperation in taking down Dr. Graves in the loan shark operation, Judge Wallace showed mercy. 18 months in county jail with credit for time served. 5 years supervised probation. His pharmacy license was permanently revoked, but he would be back with his 6-year-old daughter soon enough. Outside, reporters swarmed. Olivia slipped her hand into mine. What happens now? She whispered. I squeezed her hand gently. Now we heal, sweetheart, now we heal. By the summer of 2025, 6 months after those courthouse steps, my house, the house that had once been my nightmare, had become something unexpectedly beautiful. The July sun poured through open windows, warming the hardwood floors where Brenda had once served poisoned cake. The dining room now held a long table, surrounded by mismatched chairs, where people could gather without fear. The kitchen smelled of fresh coffee and blueberry muffins. Susan Mitchell had baked before sunrise. The sign on the front porch read, "The Hartley Mitchell Safe House." Susan stood in the living room, adjusting a banner that read "Welcome Home," painted in Olivia's careful handwriting. The exhaustion had faded from her face. She'd found purpose here, co-directing this place with me, using her nursing skills to help people like her mother, people betrayed by those they trusted most. Our first 2 residents were moving in today. Margaret, 78, whose son had forged her signature for 3 years, and James, 81, whose daughter-in-law had been overdosing him on sleeping pills while quietly selling his belongings. Both had been rescued by Adult Protective Services. Both needed a safe place to begin again. Both needed what I had needed. People who wanted their time and stories, not their money. They'll be here in 20 minutes, Susan said, checking her watch. Are you ready? I nodded. Olivia came downstairs with her laptop under one arm. She'd turned 15 last month. Her grades had never been better, and she was already talking about studying social work in college. The girl who had once been an innocent witness to her parents' crime had decided to spend her life protecting others. I couldn't have been more proud. At 2 p.m., Detective Torres arrived with Margaret and James. I watched them climb the porch steps, carefully holding small suitcases containing what remained of lives damaged by greed. Margaret's hands trembled. James kept glancing behind him, I recognize that fear. Welcome, I said, opening the door wide. You're safe here. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. I don't have much money left, my son took. We don't want your money, I said gently. We want you to heal, that's all. Later that evening, as I stood on the porch watching Olivia teach Margaret how to use an iPad, I reflected on the last 9 months of hell. My phone buzzed with a message from Torres. Marco Rosie indicted on 47 counts. Patrick cooperated. Justice. Family betrayal cuts deeper than any stranger's knife, because it comes from the hands we trusted to hold us, not harm us. I learned that lesson at 72 years old, sitting at a birthday dinner where my own daughter served me poisoned cake. But I also learned something more important, that family isn't defined by blood. Family is defined by who shows up when it matters, who risks everything to protect you, who chooses love when there's nothing to gain. Susan Mitchell, Nathan Cooper, Detective Torres. None of them were family by blood, but all of them chose to save a stranger's life. Don't be like me. Don't assume that because someone is family, they have your best interests at heart. Watch for the signs: sudden interest in your finances, attempts to isolate you from friends, unexplained medications, pressure to sign documents you haven't reviewed. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. We elder folks have a responsibility to protect ourselves and each other. We've lived too long, worked too hard, and loved too deeply to let greed destroy what we've built. And for those of you with aging parents or grandparents, remember that your attention is worth more than any inheritance. Call them, visit them, know what's happening in their lives. Family betrayal happens in silence and isolation. Your presence is the best prevention. The stories that matter most aren't the ones about being victimized. They're the ones about surviving, healing, and building something better from the ashes. That's what the Hartley Mitchell Safe House represents. Redemption, second chances, and hope. Thank you for staying with me until the end. Thank you for listening to an old man's tale of family betrayal and redemption. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and remember, real family is the people who show up when it costs them something. God bless you all.